here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the German-based band Pink Turns Blue, because I recently spoke to Mick Jogwer from the band to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff, history of the band, and also about their new album Black Swan that came out this year, 2025. They're also playing live throughout 2025, off and on, and have various dates around Europe and also in the UK. So this is the interview. So after 7 minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. Over to you.
Well, I'm the same age as you are. I'm 62 now.
Right, classic years.
And I think the first single I ever bought were, I can't remember them, but I was, let's say, in the Rubettes.
Right.
I was 8 or 9 or something. So even ABBA when I was 8 or 9.
Yeah. Well, we loved Sugar Baby Love, which was one of our classic songs of growing up, which I did an interview with a member of the Rubettes. And then I found out, I think it was one of those bands, I think there were 4 versions of the Rubettes, because I think since they split up, they've all got their kind of take of ownership of the Rubettes. It's an interesting story.
But they got me into wanting to become a singer, actually, like the lead singer of them. I think the first single I ever bought was Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Brilliant.
But I can't remember the title. And then I actually went through Pink Floyd and Genesis and all, and then went heavily into blues, like from Jimi Hendrix to Robert Johnson, like really heavy, just blues. And Eric Clapton, like all the old stuff, actually. So went back and then back again into new, when I became 18, 19, 20. I think when I was about 16 or 17, I don't know, there was a band called the Sex Pistols, and that changed everything, So this really raw. So before that, I was like many musicians, learning my instruments and having idols who are really versatile on the instruments, right, like a musician. And then there were kind of bands like Sex Pistols who kind of made clear that you don't have to be good at your instrument. You just need a message.
Right. Yes, absolutely. That was it.
Hey, and that changed everything. So then I kind of so that changed my course. And that was, I was around 16 or 18 or 20 or something. And then I slowly tried to. So I was listening to all those bands like Joy Division, Susie, The Cure, whatever was fresh, and tried then with 2022 my first own songs with my own meaning, my own stories. Because that's another step, really. Because as a young guy, it's easy to like music, and it's another thing to, let's say, to cover that music. But if you have to start with your own lyrics, your own melodies, and you have to present them to an audience for the first time, you feel like the biggest idiot in the world,
Yes.
You can't, in the beginning, you can't compare. Your lyrics are naive. They have no relevance at all. You don't have any relevance at all. But after a while, as I would say, like, I think with 24, 25, let me see. So 87, we released our first album, and I was 24 then already. Yeah.
Right.
And the band Pink Turns Blue started when I was 22 then. Let me see, it was 85. Yeah, I was 22. So 22, when the band started, Pink Turns Blue, and we had our first shows. That was with our own songs, me singing, my lyrics, playing my tunes and my chords, right? And the beginning was not that easy, but 2 years later, we had our first album. We had our first song on TV, on radio, in the charts, things like that.
Right. My God, that was all very exciting. It was interesting you mentioned your early formative years, because did you have any older brothers or sisters that gave you kind of a musical direction?
Not at all. No, I'm the oldest. So
right.
And, had a younger brother into Motorhead.
Well, God, I'm a huge, you wouldn't believe how I just love Motorhead. I did an interview with Fast Eddie just, a few months before he passed away, and I was quite relieved because I didn't know he was so poor. But Motorhead were just massive, actually, in my life.
Yeah,
But I had an older brother who was 7 years older than me, and he was into prog, and I also became kind of obsessed with listening to these records in his magic little box that he had forbidden me to touch. But I was like, oh, yes, and Genesis, Rick Wakeman, which was all very fascinating. But, having a certain limited attention span, I kind of, once I listened to them endlessly, I was a bit bored. So, yeah, it was interesting. So were you brought up in Berlin? Was that your hometown?
no, not at all. I'm coming from a very small village near Cologne. So Berlin is on the eastern part of Germany, and Cologne is on the western part. And when Germany was still divided, Cologne was one of the musical centers in Germany, really.
Right.
Although, let's say, many international musicians went to Berlin and lived there because Berlin was very special, like a special island in the middle of the GDR, and had many kind of interesting things. For, let's say, West Germans, Cologne was kind of the center of the musical thing. There were all the magazines, there were all the radio stations, and many innovative bands came from Cologne.
Right. Was there any threat that you were going to have to do national service at this stage in Germany? Because I remember hearing that Berlin, if you went to Berlin, you didn't have to do this national service.
Many went there to avoid that, yeah.
Right.
I was into music very much, and I studied bass guitar actually at the university in Cologne.
Right.
So small village, and was very good at bass guitar, and I was able to get a place there and to study bass. But after a while, I had the same feeling again that you can become very good in your instrument, but it's more important that you are part of something that has a message or some content and some connection to the youth scene, I would say.
Yeah, so you didn't want to be either, was it Chris Squire or Jaco Pastorius? You weren't going to be a serious muso. And why the bass guitar? Were you drawn to it because of seeing some musical person that you thought, God, I want to be Paul McCartney?
No, I quite like. I just like the sound of it, I must say. Yeah.
Yes.
Just fell in love with it with 12 or 13, and with 14 I joined. I think with 13 or 14 I joined my first band, and this was a kind of a kids band, and we were pretty successful. So we made it on to TV as a kids band, like.
Yes.
It was just a school band, actually.
A bit like the Osmonds, but without the gleaming teeth.
Yeah, it was more like, it was just a school band mostly covering songs. We had one or two or three own songs,
Did you do anything by the Police? Were they a big influence on your life?
I liked them very much, but I think for me they were too advanced musically because they were special in a way. The drummer was very good. The vocals were very special. You can't copy those.
The bass guitar.
Yeah, as a school band, we rather copied easy.
Right.
Smoke on the Water and Santana and things like that.
Oh, Smoke on the Water. Who doesn't like that? I suppose it's such a memorable kind of riff, isn't it? That was going to be hard. And what was the first gig that you found yourself going to in Cologne or any of that in that area?
I might not remember. I think the first thing that really influenced me was Husker Du.
Oh, yes.
That's why we are called Pink Turns Blue.
Yes.
My favorite song was Pink Turns to Blue.
Yes.
So Grant Hart was a hero for me. And
what about Greg Norton?
Not so much, no.
What, with the moustache?
No, I like Grant Hart, the way he sang.
Okay, because they were very different, weren't they? Bob Mould songs to Grant Hart songs.
Yeah.
They were like...
For me, Grant Hart songs were... I could connect to the lyrics and the way he sang much more. Wood was more straight and loud, I found, and Grant Hart was more melodious but still desperate, and he was playing drums at the same time. It just felt so wow. I would like to be able to write songs like that, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I remember it was listening to John Peel, and I remember him playing a few early songs. But then one day I heard that song called Sorry Somehow and just was like, oh my God, that's my... And Candy Apple Grey. Obviously, you'd got there a little bit before me with Zen Arcade, weren't you? And New Day Rising.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that band definitely, I saw them and that kind of changed my life, or at least I thought so. And another band around, I was pretty impressed by Susie and the Banshees
Yes.
time, because how the band performed, like the drummer, the bass player, and not so much Susie herself, but the band felt like, whoa, I would love to do something intense like that. Another band that impressed me was Jesus and Mary Chain, for sure.
Right. So that kind of new, not the new wave, but those kind of bands that were happening in the 80s from Minneapolis to London. You were there, weren't you? In great excitement. I was just trying. Yes, because when I did an interview with Greg Norton, and he didn't, because I always called it Huskadoo, and he called it something quite different, like Huskadoo, and I was like, oh God, I've been saying it wrong for all these decades. So I felt a bit intimidated when he said that. That's because he's got a new band called Ultra Bomb. That does sound like the original band, actually. But good. So there you go. So yes.
It was a Swedish game, right?
Pardon?
I think Huskadoo is a Swedish game or something.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, there you go. That's so who was your kind of go-to kind of DJ or music papers that you listened or read or listened to at the time? Because we had John Peel, the three music papers, especially Melody Maker and the NME. So what were your kind of beacons that you went to?
Well, in Germany we had the Specs, which was a bigger magazine, which is a monthly magazine, and it was very underground, independent, but pretty popular in Germany. So in Cologne you didn't get NME or Melody Maker. Yeah. It was more like this. It was called Specs, and in the end it was a copy of that, but not a weekly magazine, more monthly magazine. And so
Yes.
reviews and introduction of new bands, things like that. And then in Germany, we could hear John Peel, and I had a friend who always recorded the John Peel show onto a reel-to-reel tape.
Yeah.
So we kind of listened back to it so he was even collecting those tapes. It was really expensive because I think John Peel's show was 2 hours or something.
Yes.
I had a reel-to-reel, slow, and record the whole show, and we were playing it back. But also there was in Germany was a show called Graffiti, which was kind of just a 1 hour show, but it was kind of a German copy of it from Cologne, right?
Yes.
And the thing is like that our guitarist, he actually the guy, the boss of the show of Graffiti, he discovered us and paid some. He was really impressed by one of our demos, and he paid some big studio to re-record some of the demos. And also, what came out of it that our guitarist became the next DJ of that show.
Right. Nice. You're moving in the right circles. Were you kind of excited and curious with the kind of German bands like Malaria and Exmar Deutschland and Anstralsen Norbarten, which I'll probably mispronounce. But anyway.
But the only German band that impressed us was Einstürzen Neubauten.
Yeah. Oh, you say that so much better than I do. I know.
That's just like the German spelling, pronunciation. Einstürzende Neubauten, yeah.
Yes, not like.
So that one for sure. We played with them pretty often as well on festivals. So that was impressive. But apart from that, mainly British or American bands. Really.
Right. My God, you're very, very definite there. Those.
Yeah.
No.
And that's also that's why we always sang English, right? Because for me, let's say the English vocals hit me so much harder. I don't know. I have no idea what it is, you know. So it's like, even if I don't understand the words, the emotion was so much stronger. Whilst German bands very often are very expressive, but for me, the emotions were never that authentic. They were more kind of like, I tried to sing something cool or intelligent. They always felt contrived to me, not authentic. Whilst when I listen to Grand Heart or Jesus and Mary Chain or even Susie, when they sang a song, even without listening to the lyrics, I kind of had the idea that I knew what it was about. So it was
Yes.
speaking to my soul, right? So the English language always spoke to my soul, never
Yeah.
French or German.
Gosh, yeah, no, it's interesting because, being an indie kid from the 80s, one likes to sort of immerse oneself in music. And it always sounded John Peel was playing a lot of African music, like the Bundu Boys and the Four Brothers, and had no idea. They might have been singing about goats for all I know, but I thought it was magical. And then, Exmar Deutschland, again, I had no idea, but it just sounded like, God, this is exciting and
Oh, really?
edgy. And, there you go. So, yes, again, it was just kind of the noise, the voice and the texture. And again, a bit like the Cocteau Twins with Liz Fraser. Again, that was just being carried away with this ethereal pop sound, which was, again, beautiful. But also, remembering when one's that age, you want to be, I don't know, discovering new things and feeling like you want to be a bit alternative and terribly important, and being slightly pretentious and watching foreign films like, The Seventh Seal or, Wings of Desire or Betty Blue. We were terribly,
Yeah.
yes, immersing ourselves with art at the time. So there you go. Then did the band, sorry, I'm just going off there. Did the band then relocate to Berlin at any stage, or were you always in Cologne?
No, so we started off in Cologne. And because, like, the guitarist and me, we were kind of founding this band just with a drum machine, just the two of us. And then I brought my old drummer from another band into that band, and because he was studying art in Cologne at that time. And so we were based in Cologne for quite some time, like the 1, 2, 3 first albums, basically in Cologne or around Cologne. And then we relocated to Yugoslavia for a bit.
Nice.
And that was because actually it was Slovenia then. So it was Yugoslavia, but in the area of Slovenia, today's Slovenia. And that was because we did one tour supporting Laibach. I don't know whether you know Laibach.
Oh my God, I've done an interview with a member of the Leibach. I just, hugely influential in my life, and
Okay.
awesome band. So yes, we're
yeah. So they were kind of in Germany. They were in England by Mute Records, yes, and in Germany they were kind of releasing an album with our label, which was a small label near Cologne, right? And also our manager was booking their shows in Germany and maybe Holland and Poland or whatever. So not just like just a region, right? So he was not the global booker or manager, but the regional one.
yes.
And he got us a support slot. So we supported Laibach for 2 tours actually, and got to know, like, the one was Milan and the other one was Yanis. Milan was more the head of the group. It was very nice, but kind of very busy. And the producer or engineer was Janis Christian, and he was attending the tour mainly as an engineer. And we got to know him, befriended him, and he invited us to Ljubljana in Slovenia,
Yes,
to record our second, third, and fourth album there. And so the second we drove by car, and the third and fourth album I lived most of my time in Slovenia, just hanging around there. That was 88, 89, so just shortly before the wall came down. So it was still the eastern part.
yes.
And they liked me very much and supported me very much because I paid the studio time by smuggled gear.
Right.
So I bought studio gear in West Germany and drove by car over the border. And normally, as a Yugoslavian, there was no way how to get this stuff in, right? But as a German with a car full of instruments, you could always kind of hide 2 or 3 other things underneath. Say that's a guitar amp, but it was a studio device, right?
Right.
Or like for a customs guide, it all looks the same, had knobs, and you could pull. And so they were very, very happy that I was taking that kind of risk doing that. And so they were very supportive in giving us extra studio time, extra support, extra engagement to produce our second, third, and fourth album.
Wow, that's fantastic. And who was your producer on those albums?
That was Yanis Christchai.
Right, he was the man.
You would find that name probably on the early Laibach albums as well.
Yes, God, that was on Fun Factory, wasn't it, where you did your first ones?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Fun Factory and also Rough Trade Germany.
Right.
We belonged kind of to Rough Trade Germany.
Yes, my God.
And when after the fourth album, or around the fourth album, we were recording the fourth album, Janis and Laibach were moving to London. And I took the chance to move to London as well at that time.
Yes.
And they had to go back because Yugoslavia and Slovenia were not member of the European Union then. So they only had a visa for a certain amount of time, I think 3 or 6 months or something. And then they didn't have any work permit. But as a German, I just could stay there as long as I wanted.
God, that's a complicated world, isn't it? Yes, I could imagine.
That was around 89, 90, and I stayed in London until 95.
God, you went through that whole period. There was quite a lot of Australian and New Zealand bands that came over in the 80s. They were into the squat movement or squatting in sort of London, which I think was quite easy at that stage.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to something called, was it the Ambulance Station, or and there was a venue in North London called I think Ambulance Station. There was a lot of, I think that's where Jesus and the Mary Chain played an early gig and various other bands.
I went to Brixton Academy because I was living in South London, like was Clapham North. There was a studio I was related to. I found a relationship to. Actually, I owned already some studio equipment. And so I bought myself into a South London studio called Maximum Recording Studios in Clapham North.
Right.
And I lived in Stockwell. And you could go by foot to Brixton Academy, actually. So there were many great bands playing there. Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Ride, Jesus and Mary Chain. My Bloody Valentine was one of my favorites.
Yes. Did you ever see them when there was a band called Silverfish supporting them? I remember in about 89 I saw them and being quite excited by both My Bloody Valentine and also the support act as well. And there was the Faith Healers as well, wasn't there? So there was that kind of slight noise coming out. And then, I was going to say, but then you probably weren't into it. Then obviously Bob Mould brings out Sugar a few years later, doesn't he, in the early 90s, which came out on Creation Records. But by then you'd probably you'd probably had enough of that combo in your life.
Well, at that time, as I said, I was moving to London in 89 and was going to concerts very often between 1995, really. Yeah. Because I was really part of the music scene there then.
Well, you were there. You were right.
That way, I also met David M. Allen, who produced First, Last, and Always, The Cure, things like that, right? So he came to the studio and came around when I was kind of recording my next album, like demo stage, right? Or just recording. And he liked it so much, so he produced one of our albums.
Was that Perfect Sex?
Yeah. And that's why we got connection to The Cure, The Damned, and other bands, actually, in the London circle. And our drummer then joined The Cure for one song on one album, actually, but he didn't stay there.
Right.
So we kind of were really part of this kind of, let's say, established 80s new wave scene then, right?
Yes, that's interesting. Because a couple of weeks or months ago, I did an interview with Boris Williams, who was the drummer of The Cure during that time.
Yeah.
So he would have must have been around that world that you were sort of circulating. And I think there was a period where he was starting to sort of feel that he was going to be leaving the band after their classic period. And yes, my God. And did you?
Let's say.
Oh no, after you.
No, just I can't exactly remember the name. I would have to look at the album actually where Luis Pavlou, our drummer, played on, right? Because that was around. I think he probably did, that was about around 95, really. Yeah.
Yes.
Because 95, I became father, actually. So.
Right.
I had a friend, a German girlfriend, who moved to London, and she became pregnant, and she became mother, and I became father, and she was originally from Berlin, and when she became mother, or let's say very close becoming mother, she decided she wanted to go home to Berlin to her friends and everybody. It's like the London music scene was not really making her happy at all, becoming a mother. So she wanted to move back to all her, because she studied went to university in Berlin, wanted to go back to her friends and everything. And actually my daughter was born in Berlin already.
Right.
And I stayed in London for half a year, maybe 3/4 of a year. And then I decided to go to Berlin.
Right, that was the big move. I mean, the music scene, because you'd obviously recorded 6 albums or 7 albums really quickly, didn't you? Between 87 to 1994, there was just
I cannot. Yeah,
you were just basically bringing out one album a year at this stage.
Kind of, yeah. And they were kind of, not all of them were very good, but they were all kind of different. So kind of there was some development, and the fans liked most of them. But we were kind of searching. We were getting pretty experimental, I would say. And there was a point, especially Perfect Sex, which was the most expensive one and with the best producer, and it was the biggest flop we ever had. Really.
Right. And this was produced by David M. Allen, wasn't it?
The Perfect Sex was produced by David Allen, yeah.
Yes. And so what was the reason for both being the most expensive and being the biggest flop? What was the kind of the method, not the reason for that?
I think, to be honest, well, partly because probably the record is not good at all. That could be one valid reason. Yeah, so the songs are just not good. Not has no soul or anything, which is true. But also, it was a time of grunge. The whole music scene has changed, right? So like Nirvana and grunge came. Techno was really strong. Hip hop was really strong. So the whole indie scene, if you haven't made it big by then, there were bands like Ride, many bands. Even let's say PJ Harvey in England.
Yes.
Many new kids on the block with the more like indie guitar rock sound, more straight sound. Smiths were pretty big still. Pixies, rather Pixies. Yeah.
Yes. Well, they were doing it.
But it was like so the whole sound was changing more like indie rock, I would call it. Yeah. So away from shoegazing, away from melancholy, dark, experimental stuff, or straight rock, or straight techno, or straight hip hop, yeah, or straight pop, or whatever. So the music world had changed.
Yeah. So I was going to say vaguely, because you had sort of mentioned that grunge came along, because I did notice that during the 80s we had the indie pop world of the Smiths between 83 to 87, and then there was that kind of change. Ecstasy came along. There was suddenly that dance scene. There was also then, as you mentioned, My Bloody Valentine, which started to bring that. They had that song Feed Me With Your Kisses, and then it went to Loveless. But then you had, from Seattle, you had Bleach and then Nevermind. So were you finding it difficult to know what direction you wanted to go in by that album, Perfect Sex?
But I think, to be honest, we didn't belong to either of them. Because in the end, it's also who you are. You shouldn't, as a musician, you can't really. I find it difficult, to, let's say, to change your genre or whatever. Me coming from Germany, from a small village, I think we had quite some success, especially in Germany, but also in England, with our second and third and fourth album, because like Ex Mal Deutschland, it was different from the things that happened in England or in America. So quite a few people liked it because Germans are supposed to be a bit more technical or a bit more edgy or whatever, have a different vibe to it, which is, some people like it and others don't, right? And if you stay truthful to your, let's say, origin, or your, let's say, to your weaknesses and strengths or something, you can build a followership around that. So many people won't like you, but other people find you have a special touch to it, and they like it.
Yes.
And when we went to London, it was more complicated, I think, especially with a big producer, famous producer, to be authentic and stick to ourselves. Yeah.
Yes.
And so we kind of, when I was in Germany, Cologne, or even in Ljubljana, Slovenia, it was just my decision what I think, what was good music or not, or what meant something or not, and had something that I should offer to the world or not. And quite a few people liked it. And when I was going to London, I was, let's say, surrounded by many influences, many trends, and it was really fast. And you had Melody Maker and NME, and they were kind of pushing forward to the next thing, that you were kind of lost really in this kind of world of influences or things that were happening. Also, let's say, like hip hop and techno and grunge were really, really big, shoegaze, even My Bloody Valentine, they were kind of successful because they already had achieved something to a certain point, so that their style, that the sound and acceptance, and also were loved by NME and Melody Maker and everything, and the radio stations. So they could kind of go on and develop. But like smaller bands like ours, who are kind of nerdy or special or different, if they haven't made it then, they would just dying, I would say. And we were one of these bands dying, really, at that point. Yeah.
Well, I know that quite a lot of indie bands, I think what I found that most bands have a bit of a 5-year narrative. They have that 12-month honeymoon period. They get a single out of it. When we had John Peel, he'd give it a play. They'd do a John Peel session if they were lucky. And then there's that first album, the transit van touring around the UK, which is quite nice. The second album, bit of a bigger venue, possibly Europe, possibly America. And then by the third album, the band was sort of getting a bit exhausted after 5 years. And sometimes the music scene had changed as well. So there was that kind of, oh God, there's another sound and another scene. And even though they're probably only 25, they're suddenly a bit old compared to all these 18-year-olds who are starting out, getting their first single. And the drugs change, the drinking change, the sort of vibe changes. And suddenly, they're not quite, they're a bit lost. So there was bands like the Primitives and the Darling Buds and the Mighty Lemon Drops were struggling to see if anybody was really interested in their next album. And often the answer was no, sorry, because actually their audience were getting to an age where they were moving on and were having different ideas of getting homes, possibly jobs, careers together. And they weren't excited by the fourth album by the Mighty Lemon Drops, which I know sounds awful now, but at the time it's true. They'll get the box set 20 years later when it comes out on Cherry Red Records, but never mind. Yeah, so it's a tricky one for you creative artists. But when you did this, there was an album you did in '94, wasn't it, Muzak?
Yeah.
Is this your unplugged album?
Yeah. So that was actually with Mark Williams, who was the engineer of the Perfect Sex album, and our bassist left, and we just did it at home, actually, at my place. Once my wife was pregnant, and just so he got all the good gear in from Dave. He owned quite a good recording gear, and we recorded at home and tried to kind of a best of unplugged version.
And where did you get your additional vocalist, Sally Ann Marsh, from? Where did she appear?
She was just a friend of Mark's. I mean, that was London connections, so.
And when you recorded it, did it feel like that was going to be your kind of last album? Was that the last time? Did you feel like this was the end of the band?
Yeah, for sure.
Were you feeling a bit, what was the sense for you at that point? Did it feel like a relief, or were you feeling a bit melancholic?
No, more like a relief, because about that time the internet came, like Netscape, black and white, email, the whole world was changing, like multimedia was exploding, CD-ROMs, internet. So a lot of things were happening. And I was really into this kind of multimedia production thing. I produced videos for Simply Red. I did a CD-ROM for U2. So I was getting into this creative multimedia thing.
Yes.
In London still. And when I decided to go to Berlin, I founded my own multimedia company. And everything was so exciting. Suddenly you could, let's say, chat via email with someone in Chicago in real time. And
yes.
And so everything, the whole world was a global village then. It was very romantic, very idealistic, like the technology then, right? There was no e-commerce or anything. It was just, the internet was just a liberation, right? And so I was getting very much into that for about 10 years or so, and not making any music at all. And I gave all my instruments away and didn't have any instrument at home for 10 years or so.
Blimey, that was it.
Great.
It was relief, but then creative as well. And was Berlin an exciting, time in its history? Because obviously the wall had come down, or was that tricky?
Yeah. But no, it wasn't.
Because you must have been seeing all this building work and changes going around on the landscape and on the horizon.
Yeah, but Berlin was never pretty. Berlin really lives off its people, like especially young people. So there are a lot of creative, underground, spontaneous, artistics, a lot of artists here. The biggest advantage about Berlin is it's cheap, which is good for young people, especially if they are artists, so they can, like in London at that time, it became more and more unaffordable for musicians.
Right.
It was really, so you could try to live on the dole for a while, but still you couldn't. After a while, you couldn't pay the rent, especially in London. You were supposed to buy a flat. If you don't have a proper job, there was no way to do that. And many people from Amsterdam, New York, London, or Madrid, or wherever, moved to Berlin. And because meeting other musicians or artists was pretty easy from all over the world, and it was really cheap to survive.
Yes.
But in Berlin, you can live, at that time, you could live for, let's say, £100 or 300 euros or whatever. And was even Deutschmarks then. And you could have a meal for €3 a day.
Right. My God, that's.
And in London at that time, you would need £10 a day already. So
it was
amazing. Berlin,
yes.
and you met a lot of, let's say, nice, interesting people from all over the world, like Americans, English, Spanish, whatever, right? Dutch people, and you could found bands and try things out, and yeah.
Yes, interesting. So then, obviously, you were happy, new life, new baby, everything going well in Berlin. Then you got the call, in 2000, and was it 3 that suddenly the door got kicked again, and you were persuaded to reform the band.
Yeah. So what happened is, like, I met a girl. She was making music, right? And she got invited to contribute 2 songs on a compilation, and she just asked me, "Oh, could you help me write 2 songs?" I said, "Okay, let's do that. No problem. Let's go in the studio, write 2 songs." And they were not very good songs, but that kicked me kind of off, saying, "Okay, yeah, it's kind of was fun, nice session." And the 2 of us founded a duo, like an electronic project.
Right.
I was going around to record companies and festivals saying, "Okay, that's a new project. Do you like it?" And they liked it. But at the same time, they were asking me, "Yeah, but you're this singer from this 80s band, and it's really big still, like people are asking for it. And if couldn't you imagine just reform that band and make a new album, whatever, or at least play on a few festivals or shows or something?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to ask the other guys, like our drummer." Then, after the Cure, but he was very short with Cure, just for 1 album.
Yes.
He was Blue. He then joined Skunk and Nancy. Then he played for Anastasia, like on a pop tour. And he was really fed up with all these kind of, he said, like playback, big festival, big tours.
Yes.
A lot of money, but really soulless. And he said, "Yeah, let's do it," right? And so I got all the old, like, London members together, and we played a few festivals, even the first guitarist for a few shows. And and people were really welcoming it. So you felt like, oh, that really means something to some people, right?
Yes.
And after a while, said, "Okay, so if people really like it, let's try to do a new album," which was Phoenix. I think that was 2005 or 7 or something. And that was really a success. I mean, it's not the most popular, but it kind of, everybody liked it. I don't know why. We just did it for fun. Let's see what happens. And everybody was going crazy about it, like record of the month, everything, the radio station playing it. Because I think the thing is, the scene has to have, let's say, we had still kind of some special touch to it or whatever. A bit like if X-Mal Deutschland would be able to do a new album or something. So, like, maybe not as successful as the first or the big 3 songs, right? But good enough that people enjoy it very much. Say, yeah, it's So it was still not my favorite song, but it's the second, third, fourth. It's great,
Yes.
And so I did that for a few years, but not doing many shows because I was still kind of having a day job, really. So it was more like fun and building a small studio. And in 2015, when my daughter became 18 or 20 or something, I said, "Okay, if she's now living her life and I don't have any responsibilities, why not doing music full time?" And then I started to become more serious about it, saying, "Okay, let's try to make something fresh." And also, what happened is around 2010, 2015.
Yes.
New bands appeared on the scene, like young bands, and they were kind of rediscovering this post-punk thing. And namely, like, bands, I don't know whether you know them, like Lebanon Hanover.
No.
They're pretty popular. Like on Spotify, they have more than 1 million listeners a month.
Yes, I know. This is embarrassing, isn't it? But what was this band called?
Lebanon Hanover.
Oh,
like the state Lebanon and the city Hanover. Or do you know She Passed Away?
She passed away. God, she passed away. God, I need to passed away.
Like a young, they call it Cold Wave. Soviet?
Oh, I've come across Cold Wave. Gee, I know there's a lot of waves now. Yes, no, that's true.
Like Cold Wave is like very young kids. Like so let's say they started 2010, 2015. With a drum machine and a bass guitar and a guitar, a bit flangy and like, let's say, melancholic, low voice, whatever, or a bit like Husker Du, like speed up but funny chords. And actually the whole kind of post-punk scene was revived in a way, but by young kids. It was not the old people, because so the old bands were normally playing on big festivals because they got invited as headliners.
Yes.
And it was getting more and more boring because they were only playing the old songs like Sisters of Mercy or something. The only band, even The Cure, didn't record a new album for 15 years or something, right? So they were playing the old hits, and fans were going there, but nothing new happened. And then there was kind of this new generation coming, many of them, becoming really popular and successful, and getting a new audience, like 18, 20, 25-year-olds, and you call them baby bats, like kids dressed in black.
Yes.
And into this, let's say, melancholic, darker, atmospheric sound. And it had to do with this global warming thing, like this kind of uncertainty about the future and what the world is going to be downhill anyway, everything's low. So many people getting kind of not positive about the world as a whole, and all these bands kind of, addressing this kind of topics were kind of getting into vogue. And so I discovered some of these bands, and I think, oh, I really like that, because that's the same thing we kind of addressed during the Cold War, like,
yes,
kind of desperation and looking for many cultural connections and things, and being experimental about sounds and everything. And at the same time, they've got really interesting topics and they have an audience following them. And I got really into that band. So they kind of got me into this mood. I really should try to make Painter's Blue music, but with a connection to today's world and today's topics, with a fresh sound. And that's why I did an album called Tainted, which was a title which was 21. Yeah, 21. And so that was heavily influenced by these kids. And the other thing is, like, I met many of these kids because they were big fans of ours. So I was a fan of the kids and they were fans of us. And so we became friends and were spending time together and things like that. And I had the ambition to make a record that meant something to the kids, not only the old guys of my age, right?
Yes.
Try to get a new followership, right? Or find new people. And Tainted, the title meant the world is already tainted, but we still can save it. So if we only try. And many of these kids loved it. So that got us back on the map. So we toured half of the world, really. So we toured US, we're pretty successful there. Got our slots in UK again. But from Moscow to Georgia to Israel to South America, North America, Canada. Yeah, so we traveled. So we were invited everywhere, played everywhere, very often with his kids. So rarely with the old heroes of our 80s, more like, so we became part of this cold wave, young wave scene, but are the old guys, right?
Yes, I get it. And there's a lot of these, I don't know, there's light festivals, compilations coming out that are sort of merging these things. And there's quite a lot of interest in sort of both, like you said, these new bands, but also sort of I suppose, yeah, just a scene. I suppose in our day, back in the 80s, it was very tribal, wasn't it? And I think it kind of sometimes helps artists even if
Yeah,
they always say, I don't want to be part of a scene. It's like, well, it does help actually. Then people might discover you.
it
So I
does. It
don't
does.
knock it too much, really. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So yes, you obviously found you're sort of back on that sort of musical zeitgeist again, which is always an important one.
We have
So when
so our audience is two parts. Like we've got 50 plus in our audience, and we've got 20 plus.
that's a nice balance, isn't it? Really,
No, we've got
one group will buy merch and T-shirts, and one will at least jump about and look quite enthusiastic. So you got a good market there on both. So when you after you done Tainted, you toured that. Did you say you went to Did you go to America touring that particular album?
It was 22, I think, right after Corona.
Yes, good old Corona.
Uh,
Yeah. And when did you start recording All Right in Black Swan? When did this start to sort of
it was
appear?
kind of was so the first ideas were during the America tour, like the first more like lyrics and themes, because I was pretty, let's say, shocked, I must say, because the first time we were in America was 2019 already, with but rather playing old songs, because like our first two albums are pretty popular with some people there.
Hmm.
And everything was nice and funny, exciting, right? And when we went back after Corona 22, I was shocked because there were many homeless, many people on the street, especially with fentanyl. So you had all those tents and people
Yes.
with cars, mostly in Vancouver, Seattle, in some cities it was really like I was like a war scene. I mean, coming from Europe then, right? And now, so I think, and let's say this was a time when you could feel the divide and the how many people were lost, like left behind, not having no kind of perspective, future or hope, anything, hopeless, right? And then you got those many people getting richer and richer and becoming more and more racist and anti-immigration, and like so the divide was getting bigger, and not only in America, also in Germany, Europe, and everywhere. So everywhere was kind of you had Johnson in Great Britain, this in France and in Italy, in Germany now as well, like 20% AfD and everything. So you could really see. So for Tainted, for me, I knew the world was in a bad situation, but was still kind of some hope that, especially in the environment, was being taken seriously, and everybody was trying at least to slow down the bad influence of humanity and thinking of the next generation, or giving them at least a small chance or something. Much too slow, but at least there was a group of people trying hard, right? But then I could really feel that many more people didn't care, actually.
Yes.
Didn't give a fuck, right? And then yeah, for now, so when they voted for Trump, though everybody knew who he was and what he did and what kind of guy he is, right? I was kind of I was giving up, right? so,
Yes.
so that led to some of the songs on Black Swan, like still kind of strongly believing in the good in humanity, many people, but at the same time very desperate and feeling powerless and resigned, yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Yes, a curious time indeed. I know. You
So
sort of
it's not giving up, but it's so, let's say, Black Swan is much more serious, or much more, it's darker. And I
yes.
couldn't do anything about it. My lyrics are darker, the songs are darker, just because I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've been listening to the album a lot, and I think it's got a great, a great sound to it. But also, yes, the lyrics are sort of, very, very strangely sort of have that romantic melancholia. There's a track called "Why Can't We Just Move On," which again is one of my my standout tracks on the album. Can you remember how that song came about?
Well, mostly, very often my songs are a combination of, let's say, like has a like a personal thing, like a relationship thing. If you have a fight and you can't agree on anything, why don't you just each one goes away? But at the same time, when I experience like this big divide, especially in America, but not only in America, like for let's say the left and the right, the liberals and the conservatives not being able to talk anymore, like the hate is getting more and more, and instead of fighting each other, why just you don't go your way, and why being aggressive, why all this hate, what is it good for? If you don't think you can agree on anything, why can't you just leave the other one alone
Yes.
and leave each other alone in peace, instead of war or fighting or being aggressive, and I had the feeling that more and more often the sides are putting more and more effort in hating each other than trying to bridge things or solve things or find a future together or anything. So it's a really, let's say,
Yes.
I don't believe in anything anymore. Why can't we just each one go our ways and good is?
Yes, and just move on. I always remember. I can't remember what the film was, but someone, it wasn't that profound, but someone said, "Let's just agree to disagree and just keep."
At the same time, very often, what I quite like that song also is like I try to. The melody and the harmonies are very soft and very positive. So it's not like, why don't we go? More like an act of friendship. Let's
Yes.
celebrate as friends.
And and when did you get the sort of the title? When did that track Black Swan? But I know there is more to life. When did that did that appear quite early on within this project, or was that something that developed as you were writing this album?
And normally, this title Black Swan, the song, but I know there's more to life. That was pretty early, right? Which was a strong ballad, and I just liked it. And but the title Black Swan came very late, because normally what I try to do is like the title of the album, also the cover is more like a book cover. So write the story first, and when the novel is finished, like I say, okay, those are the 10, 11 songs. I normally write about 50 songs out of experience. And
Yes.
like the 10, I think they belong to each other. They could be could get into one book. Right? So they kind of are one bouquet of or those are the 10 pictures I would put in the exhibition, because they kind of belong together. And then I try to find a title for it, like a book cover title.
Right.
And then I remembered like the time from being on tour in America, being shocked. I don't know why I'm shocked, because maybe because I was so naive or something. I think if you watch TV is one thing, but if you're in the streets in Vancouver going to your show with your guitar and you have to step through the people on fentanyl, it's different.
Yes.
just you just feel it's a horror show, right? And you think you're now going on stage, making music, entertain yourself and people, and then you go back to the hotel through those people, absolutely desperate, or the students living in tents, or students living in cars because they can't afford a home or whatever. So it was like, as a musician, if you travel through a country like America, you feel like a small rock star having fun. We're on tour, everything is just party, and then you have to go through this reality. So it was really, that shocked me, still shocks me, right? This kind of being, and this kind of, at the same time, black swan is normally, I think, is mainly used in financial terms. If something happens that nobody expects and everything, the whole world turns around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also stands for that it's an event you don't expect, but people, when it happened, everybody is able to explain it. We could have foreseen it, blah, blah, blah. So all the smart talk, there's, like smart asses thinking, we already knew it, or, so the people who like to explain everything, they can always explain everything. And this black swan for me stands for, they all have explanations, but nobody does anything.
Yes.
Everybody's feeling, we should, we could, it's not good, but it's making a career on it, on the problems, but nobody's really acting anymore, right?
Yes. And on that sort of, it's almost the penultimate track, I think it is. I Can Read Your Name in the Stars. Where did that sort of idea and sort of
that's just a love song. So
right.
That's actually probably the first love song I've written for 20 years or something. So that's really like, I like the stars, and I'm now I'm living like 3/4 of an hour outside of Berlin. Like I built my own little house with a studio and everything, right? And here's everything's pitch black at night, and you can see many stars, right? So especially if it's great, after spending all your day with you in the studio, wherever, and then you go out and look at the stars and feel good and think you connect to the universe and everything. You feel small and the universe is big and everything's, I don't know, it just makes me happy.
Well, absolutely. No, and I do something very similar as well. Just to sort of,
I'm married with, I'm living here with my wife. We're married for more than 15 years now. Yeah. Having 3 daughters, we're happy, we're fine. Although the world is not in a good shape at all, but the two of us are really happy, and so
keeping it going, really. And just, I mean, there's a sort of, you mentioned the love song, Can't Do Without You. Is that also connected with sort of the same theme, or was that a different idea with that song?
It's not actually, Can't Do Without You is not a love song. It's a kind of a love song, but it's not a love song. So that's more really, again, about the big divide, so it's kind of a love song, but at the same time it's about a bit like, why don't we just move on but apart? It's like, and it's like, we can have political differences, like one is saying we need to help the poor, the other one say let them help themselves, whatever. So we have all those kind of political topics about like liberals or Democrats and conservatives or whatever. But at the same time, you can't solve anything if you don't do it together. Because just finger pointing and saying, what you're thinking, your ideology, your politics is all shit, So I just, saying everything's wrong what you think and everything's what you think. In the end, this song is about like either as between 2 persons or between 2 parties or whole country, The only way to move forward to create a better future, to make things better, to improve things, is to bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the title, actually. So the verses are pretty much about different political views, whether you should help the poor or not, or the weak or not, or should fight against the bad ones or not, But in the end, the only solution is if you get those political views together and say, okay, what are our goals? Where are we going to go for?
And then just kind of lastly, there's the other kind of standout track, Dancing with Ghosts. What was the kind of, where did that inspiration come from?
So Dancing with Ghosts is about relationships, but unhealthy relationships.
Right.
So actually, it's about it's really like about a person who all her life actually tries to break free from her mother or her father, from parents, or like you fall in love with the wrong person, someone who takes advantage of you. You can't break free, and you kind of dying inside instead of being able to break free in the end. And so that's why the chorus is. So the first line is like, okay, you're eating my soul. I need to go because you're eating my soul, and blah blah blah. And the chorus really, so go and dance with your ghosts, because I can't free myself from the ghosts of this person or this. It's like unescapable. For many people, they go to a therapist and try to escape or try to find many ways instead of just going and live their lives. Because normally, especially let's say many people have problems with their parents, and it's difficult to say, just forget about your parents and never see them again, because there's a inbuilt love and respect or connection, which you can't break free that easily.
And a dollop of guilt as well, I think.
So if you just leave let's say, if your mother is a witch, or bitch or whatever,
yes,
but she's weak and needs your help and support, if you just go and live your life, you have a bad conscience.
Yes, that's a lot of guilt, isn't there? That's going to be one that's a tricky one to navigate. That's yes, fighting for the right. Yeah, so I can see you've got certain tracks, Fighting for the Right Side and Black Swan. And the track Like We All Do, is that again politically driven, that track?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So it's more like self-reflection. Like it's about, as long as we are kind of, let's say, poor, we are more idealistic and left wing. And if we become rich, we're getting more and older, we might become more conservative and more protective and less sharing and less.
Yes, this is something we've seen in many people.
But in the end, I mean, the whole album is always also, let's say, an album of an old man, right? So,
yes,
you become more, let's say, cynical or established or detached if you become older, right? And so so every title is also like, let's say, a call to myself, like, don't get lazy, don't become complacent.
yes. Or resigned. That's the other classic, isn't it? When people are resigned to a situation and then become.
And for a singer and a musician, it's really important that you don't become a lecturer, but you acting. So part of this active, idealistic, if you just think about what should be done, it's worthless. It's not relevant. So if you want to convey it in a way that it has some meaning or some authenticity or some that people actually believe that you know what you're talking about, then you should also try to to live a life like that, right? So it's
Yes.
like we all do is like it's yeah, it's a call also to everyone, but also like to myself not to become complacent.
Yes, well, it's good to. I know there's nothing like being disappointed with one's kind of sometimes 70s or 80s, and there's a couple of 60s kind of singers or musicians that whose political views make it quite tricky to listen to their records now and think, that started well, but ended in a place which I couldn't have ever imagined. But that's that's enough to make you keep a sort of self-reflection on not sort of ending up in the same alleyway or the same space, because that would feel disappointing, I suppose. In my sort of world, anyway. And just lastly, the song "Stay for the Night," is that again one of the kind of relationship love songs of yours?
That's definitely a relationship song, but also it's let's say it's that is definitely a love song to the scene, because the good thing is like as I said, we're traveling the world and we're finding friends everywhere, you know, and so we very often, let's say we do our show, and after that there's a DJ making some music, right? And you see all those young and every age people staying there and meeting and going and because we are more like a rock band, like a guitar, real drums and things like that. I was thought of it would be great to have one song that people could just close their eyes and open their heart and souls and dance to. So it was kind of so we felt that we had this kind of funny hook, right?
Yeah.
The keyboard thing, do 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 do, and so we tried to close our eyes and we played our instruments to this kind of hook as if we were dancing in this club when we after our shows, right? Like the after show parties, and that's why yeah. So stay for the night is always an invitation. Actually, many people ask us to stay for the after show, right?
Yes.
But very often we have to leave for the airport or whatever, because next day you have to drive 5 hours, 7 hours, do a sound check, do an interview, go on stage again. So normally we say after show we should go to bed as early as possible or hit the road or whatever.
Yes.
Stay
I
for the
know.
night for me was like that rings in my ears, because that means so let's say you go to Sao Paulo. You arrive even a day early because you have a 20-hour flight or whatever, and time shift and things like that. And you meet those people, and they kind of you go along very well. It's kind of your new friends, and you just meet them for one day, and they love your show, and they would like to spend another 2-3 hours with you, and but you have to go. So this kind of to stay for the night also for me emotionally is more like this thing, but the lyrics actually have a like a relationship thing in it.
Sure.
Yeah. But as I said, most of my songs, I I have both sides to it. So because I have my political or like society views, which are
Hmm.
so I've my messages there, but to make the vocals really um, um, to connect with the sound, the music, and to make it emotional and authentic for me to sing it, I always have to make have a personal thing in it, because otherwise it would be, more like lecturing. That doesn't mean, because I'm not a politician. I'm not a powerful person. I'm not a. I'm not even not even a professor in anything, right? I'm just a singer. So
Yes.
and yes, I meet people and I like them and I have to do with them. But I would so the message to be valuable for everybody to feel it, I have to feel it. And if I want to make it the feeling right, I have to add a personal aspect to it.
Yes. God, that's amazing. Well, look, this has been fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. And I mean, I've really loved listening to that new album. It's been fantastic to hear it, and the kind of quality and the sonic quality, texture of it is stunning. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. Indeed, and that is the end of the interview. A few kind of little technical moments, not a lot actually. The reception on mix end was a little bit hit and miss at times, but anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. That was me in conversation with the member of Pink Turns Blue, Mick Jogwer. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on all the social media platform sites, and also all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week, stay safe.